Hello everybody, my name is Katie and today's video is going to be on tropes. I have 7 tropes with 7 books. Cool! These are 7 of my favorite tropes. This isn't all of my favorite tropes, but these are the ones that I could think of while I was writing the list. I may do this again and do even more, but we'll see. I haven't decided yet, and I may even do ones that are tropes that I don't like and books that have those tropes so that you know to avoid them if you don't like those tropes, or read them if you do. Out of these 7 books, there are 2 books that I don't own, but I do own the rest of them, or well, technically I own one of them, but I own it in audio, so not sure that counts. The first trope I'm going to talk about is folklore. I love folklore in stories. I think they're so much fun, and the book that I have to go with folklore is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lynn. This has dragons and a bunch of other like folk stories along with it. I believe that it's Chinese, but I could be wrong. This is about a girl who lives in a very, very poor village, and her dad tells her stories every night, and her mother disapproves and believes that he is just filling their daughter with frivolous, unimportant stories. And she goes on an adventure to ask the man of the mountain or man of the moon? Oh, the old man of the moon, yes, for a wish. And so it is this girl and her dragon that she meets along the way, trying to find the man of the moon, basically. There's also other folk tales going on as well. There's also the folk tale of the Tiger Man. I don't know exactly what he's called again. I think it's the Tiger King or something like that, as well, that's going on inside of this. It is very, very fun. It's long, but it's not difficult to read, and it is a middle grade as well. It is some wonderful lessons to learn as well. The next one I have for this is going to be easy but relatively unexplained magic. To kind of explain what I mean, it's easy magic to understand, or even that you don't need to understand. It's just happening, and it is, generally speaking, unexplained how it works or why it works. And for this one, I have Witchwood by Tara Mafi, which I do not own, and even Furthermore, honestly. Witchwood is the second book, and I prefer it to the first one, but they both have this aspect. Witchwood is about a girl who lives in a town called Witchwood, and she is the cleaner of the dead, or like the one that helps the dead pass on. And none of that is explained how she does it. She just does, and I think that that's very interesting. And same for Furthermore, nobody's explained how everybody's like gift works. It just does. While I do love very deep magic and very like intentional magic, I also really do just love this whole sometimes people just have magic and you don't have to know how it works type of stories. And Witchwood, I think, is a wonderful story, and Furthermore are both wonderful books to find that kind of magic. Witchwood is rather dark, so if you are not interested in things like dead bodies or violence in middle grade, and rather graphic violence, might I add, I wouldn't really recommend it. However, I absolutely adored that about it. I personally would recommend listening to the audiobook because the narrator, whose name I will put on the screen, does an amazing job. Trope number 3 is a little bit weird, I'm not gonna lie, and I call it, and I saw this on TikTok, so maybe some other people have come across it, and it is called Birdmen and Their Sensible Wives. So this trope is about a very, not specifically effeminate man, but usually an effeminate man who is very like out there, very stylish, very preoccupied with how he looks, usually very suave or rather dumb, not in the sense that he's not intelligent, but just in the sense that he's kind of a dork. But he puts on this air about him that keeps people thinking that he is very, very cool when he's really not. And then the sensible wife is the woman who is married to or in love with the Birdman, who's the one that kind of keeps him out of trouble, or also gets into trouble, but does it in a much more sensible, like less dramatic way. I actually only have 2 examples of this because the only author I have ever come across that has the Birdman and their sensible wives trope in many of their books is Diana Wynne Jones. Pretty much Howl, Pendragon, or Crestomancy from the Crestomancy series. This one is about Conrad, but Crestomancy are the blueprint for this trope. Birdmen and their sensible wives. Howl's Moving Castle, most people know what this one is about. It's about a woman named Sophie Hatter who works in a hat shop and ends up being cursed by the Witch of the Waste to look like an old woman, and she goes to Howl's Moving Castle, Howl, who is known for eating the hearts of women, and ends up becoming their maid, basically, and in doing so is trying to figure out how to lift her curse. Crestomancy, on the other hand, is about specifically Crestomancy. Each book is about a different person. However, you meet Crestomancy in every book in different stages of his life to see him become the Crestomancy, because Crestomancy is actually a title, not his name. The first book in the series is called Charmed Life. Like, the publication order is not in chronological order, so I would recommend reading it in chronological order, which is also how Diana Wynne Jones recommended you reading it. And he is a very well-dressed, all the time man that is a huge absolute dork, and so is Howl. Though Howl, I will say, is much more preoccupied with how he looks. Crestomancy is more preoccupied with how he looks due to the fact that he can be called upon at any given time and he would like to look nice. So, just in case, he is always dressed to the nines. And then you have Millie, his wife, who is a very sensible woman, very down-to-earth woman, who is a very happy woman. And you have Sophie, who is just as much of a troublemaker as Howl, but is a lot less dramatic about it. This next one is kind of interesting, and I haven't seen it very often either, just like the Birdmen and the Sensible Wives, but it does happen more often, I believe, and it is Immortal Mortals. People who find immortality and don't know what to do with it, or people who find immortality and don't know they've found immortality, or any kind of immortal mortals that don't know what to do with their predicament. I think it's fascinating. My recommendation for this is going to be Bakano. This is book 1. It is The Rolling Bootlegs by Ryogo Narita. He's also the creator of Durarara, if you liked that series. This is a light novel, which is a Japanese YA novel, I believe. And it is about New York in the 1930s and the mob, and like there's a lot of immortals, and you find this out in the very beginning. There are a lot of immortals in this book. Some of them know that they're immortal, some of them don't. Some of them have been immortal for hundreds of years. Some of them have been immortal only for the last maybe 2 or 3. This takes place in the 1930s, between 1931 and 1934, I believe, and it follows a cast of characters. There is not a main character in this book series, I will say, and it can be confusing at times trying to follow the timeline because it does bounce around a lot. But when you do kind of figure it out, it is very, very, very interesting. So you have people who are absolutely bloodthirsty, people who are just trying to survive, people who are absolute idiots, but somehow end up being some of the most important characters in the whole series. I'm not entirely sure how many people it follows, but I do know that it doesn't follow every single character that ends up being important in the series as a whole. This is also a very, very long series. I believe there are 23 books in the series, but I've only read the first 2, so. Number 5 on this list, I actually lied, there are 6 tropes, not 7, but number 5 on this list is actually loving dangerous men. So, for instance, a big, usually big, not always big guy that could kill you very, very easily, has very little interest in other people, doesn't really like anyone else except for their loved ones, and they absolutely adore their loved ones and would do anything and everything for them. And this is actually one of my favorite character types ever. They're usually my favorite character if they're going to be in a book, and for this one I specifically picked Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. I've talked about Artemis Fowl a lot. I feel like, maybe not in this channel, but in my old channel I definitely did. And Artemis Fowl, the character Butler, is exactly this trope. He's a huge 6'6" bodyguard trained to kill people and be basically an assassin and work for the Fowls. And but he absolutely adores his little sister, and he cares so much about Artemis. But I absolutely love this series, and he is my favorite character of the series. So the series as a whole is about this kid named Artemis who runs a billion-dollar crime organization, basically, that his dad used to run, but his dad has gone missing. And so now he is running it, and it is like a 100-year-old crime business for his family. It takes place in Ireland, and he has decided that he is going to steal gold from the fairies. And he ends up, I think, kidnapping one of them. He ends up kidnapping one of them, and everything goes from there. And it is a wonderful story. There are 8 stories in this, so I would highly recommend this if you enjoy technologically advanced fairies. A very, very smart, I think he's 14 in the first book, a very, very smart 14-year-old, and a bunch of adventure. And now we're at the last trope, which I don't have the book for, and it is strong intellectual women going on an adventure. Specifically a fantasy adventure, just because I think for myself that's more fun. Generally speaking, I love adventure novels. I think they're so much fun. You get to go to different countries inside of these fictional worlds. You get to learn fictional cultures. You also have this highly intelligent, very strong woman lead. And for this one, I have A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, or just really the entire Memoirs of Lady Trent series. It is my favorite audiobook series that I've ever read or listened to. Lady Trent is so smart. She's 19 and she's going on this expedition with her newlywed husband to go and find dragons and study them in a country that is a lot like, I would say, Russia or Ukraine, maybe. Very cold climate, kind of. It sounds very Russian in the scenery, I guess you could say, but it is very interesting, very lovely. Each book is about science. She is a natural scientist. That's why it's called A Natural History of Dragons. And each one she finds new dragons, and whether some are dragons or not dragons. And throughout the whole thing, there's this mystery behind this old, just absolutely ancient race that were either some form of god or something else, and nobody's entirely sure. Absolutely fascinating, and they only get better. The first one is absolutely wonderful. The second one, through like the 4th, I think there are 5 books, through the 5th are just amazing. And Marie Brennan just recently came out with a standalone like finale to the whole series about Lady Trent's granddaughter, which is also a absolutely beautiful novel. So there you go. If you like dragons, science, Victorian England type of setting, and adventures, here you go. The perfect book. That's all I have for today. Like I said at the beginning, I may do this again, but do it with reverse instead of tropes that I like, tropes that I dislike, and books that have those. I'm not entirely sure on that though, so don't hold me to it. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. I hope you check out some of these books, and if you do, please let me know. I would be so excited to hear about your opinions and what are some tropes that you really like, because why not? Until next time, have a good evening, a good afternoon, or a good morning, depending on when you're watching this. And until I see you again, happy reading. Bye.